oftentimes men will say to me, I'm scared to feel what I'm feeling because I'm scared I'll never come back. Women will say, if I start to cry, I'm afraid I'll never stop crying. And I always look at both genders and say, I'm scared if you don't start down this path, you're never going to come back.
We RAD Dads, bringing a soft edge to a hard topic. Join us every week as we talk to real people with real stories, from the everyday single parent to family professionals, and find entertainment along the way. Join me, Walter J. Eggers, as I discover and share wisdom. Positive changes start here.
Episode 56. Hello and welcome back again, Rad Dads. Walter here with you. Pumped for this week's guest, Nell Daly. She is dropping nuggets, and this one goes a little deep, but it's extremely valuable. I found this, a lot of the little known stuff that we don't talk about, but we deal with constantly, and I'm still dealing with it. Hey, let me back up off that for just a second, because there is a ton to unpack with today's show. But first, let me welcome the new listeners of the We RAD Dads show. Thank you so much for showing up, and to all the longtime listeners, thank you so much for your support. And speaking of support, I would love if you were able to support the show. I don't know, maybe use this little thing called Amazon. It's this new thing. We have an Amazon affiliate here at We Rad Dads, and I would really appreciate if you could use the Amazon affiliate for the show. And what that does is, instead of your whole purchase going to Amazon, we get a portion of it. It doesn't cost you anything extra. How do you do that, you ask? Well, I'm glad you asked. Me? It's really easy. There's a couple ways to do it. One of which is to go by www.weraddads.com and click on the little sidebar that says the Amazon affiliate link. It's right there on the left. You can't hardly miss it. The other way is the quick links. If you're an iTunes type person, just click on the colorful We Rad Dads banner and it'll take you to a very brief quick links section, and it is just what it sounds like. It'll take you to the show notes. It'll take you to Amazon. It'll take you to our Audible trial. That's right, Audible trial. If you are a book type person, but you have difficulty setting aside time to read, and audio is your thing, which, I'm going on a limb here. Yeah, I think it might be up for us. Hey, if audio is your thing, audibletrial.com/WeRadDads is the link, or the quick links, as I just mentioned, or again, there's a link on the website. Guys, really love having you on the show, and I want to get right to it this week. But I want to make sure that you guys know about the 7 essentials as well. It's a PDF I put together for people who are, for dads specifically, anybody really, going through the separation for the first time. And it's these 7 essential things that you need to do to get back on track, guys. So head on over to the We Rad Dads homepage, www.weraddads.com, and pick up the 7 essentials. It's a little pop-up. It's an email capture. I'll tell you that right now. But as of yet, 0 emails. Total of 0 plus 0 emails have gone out, penetrating your inbox with spam. That's not my style. But as of now, that's the only way I know how to get it to you, right to you. The one thing I'm going to ask for you guys is to share. If you enjoy what I have for you this week, any week, every week, share with friends. Post this on any of the social groups. Tell your friends about it. Text it to them. There's a lot of different ways to do that. I really appreciate your support of the show in using our affiliates and sharing it with friends. Guys, just a jam-packed episode, and I want to get right into it with our guest this week, Nell Daly. She's an amazing person, and very easy on the senses, all of them. Visually, yes, checking the box. Audibly as well, she is, I'll go over her accolades in the show, but man, it's incredible. I'm very blessed, very fortunate to be in her presence. So, without further ado, I'm just going to jump right into it here, guys. I hope your week is going well, and I hope that, you can take some of the information that we're sharing here today and apply it to yourself and use what we're talking about this week to understand yourself better, to give yourself grace, and to really kind of figure out what's going on, bubbling under the surface, as it were. Anyway, let's get to it this week with my interview with Nell Daly. Hello and welcome back again, Rad Dads. Walter Eggers, and I'm charged and ready. It's been a wonderful break, but I'm ready to get back on the horse and see where it takes us. I am super excited for our guest today, Nell Daly. And if you don't know Nell, she is just burning it up on the podcast tracks lately and is with one of her own in the works. As a matter of fact, Nell is an extremely successful psychotherapist with her own private practice located on Fifth Avenue, New York, New York. Nell is helping high caliber people discover their own truth and has a fascination with understanding men. I thought it was me trying to understand women, but hey, apparently it's a two-way street. Currently, Nell is a divorced mother of three, and has just a host of accolades, attending Harvard, Trinity College, a master in creative arts from Columbia University, a master, that's right, another one, in clinical social work from NYU. She's a licensed clinical social worker in New York and Connecticut and has an advanced training in parental mood disorders. She's a regular on Fox News and other outlets and a TED speaker. Oh my gosh, you've also been featured on the Tyra Banks Show and Huffington Post. Is there anything you can't do, Nell?
Oh, do I answer that honestly?
Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you.
Oh, thank you. I'm so psyched to be here. This is awesome. Thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. You know, we've been back and forth now, and it's just funny. You just said that it's like talking with an old friend at this point, and I really enjoyed connecting with you over this past, month or so? A little over?
A little over a month. It's been one of the best gifts of getting into the whole podcasting world is my friendship with you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I accept that for sure. And I need it. I really
the work
appreciate
you're
it.
doing is really, really meaningful. And I think needed. I think that men need a place where they can come and hear a voice in the dark that's going through the exact same things that they're going through and hopefully get some good advice about how to handle their situations. So it's meaningful work and it's important work, and I'm thankful you're doing it.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm just opening up the channel, but I rely on professionals like yourself to really help us out here. So, Matt, your time is valuable, and I really appreciate you. Nell, can you fill in any blanks? I don't know. Did I leave you any room there? Can you tell us like a snapshot of who and where you are today, right now?
Sure. Well, he gave you a pretty good rundown about where I am professionally. I'm doing a podcast, and we're creating a media company, and we're doing a lot of video content as well. I run a private practice on Fifth Avenue in New York City. I have an office out in Westport, Connecticut. But I think probably what's more interesting to your viewers is my personal story, especially as it relates to your podcast, because we're both divorced. Well, you're not divorced. I'm divorced, but you're a single parent, and I am now a single parent because I'm divorced. So I have 3 children. Right now they're 12, 7, and 5. I have 2 boys and a little girl in the middle. And I was divorced 3 years ago, coming up, or just like a week ago, I guess. It was 3 years ago. And so I've been through so many things as a single parent that there's just, you know what it is? You know what the deal is here? You just can't imagine what you're going to go through. Yeah. And if you did, for me, I don't know if I would have gotten divorced if I had known how difficult it was going to be. Like I look back and I have those thoughts all the time.
Oh yeah.
So
totally.
So
I'm glad to hear that you say that. Go ahead. Yeah. So that's go ahead.
So my personal journey is that's where I'm at now. I'm a mother. I'm a single mother. I'm trying to have somewhat of a personal life while I'm obviously running a very crazy professional life because we all need to make money. And, just going through the same struggles that many of the men that I see are going through. And I think one of the reasons I have found working with men so fulfilling is because in my private practice, I see both men and women, but over the years, I related on a different level to men in some ways because of the fact that I ended up having to become a primary breadwinner. So even though 40% of women now are the primary breadwinners in the United States, and we're graduating at higher rates from college than men are, in my particular circumstances, in the flow of my world, I was still seeing more men that were the primary breadwinner than women. So a lot of the same issues that they faced in terms of feeling the pressure and the responsibility to be a provider, I really resonated with. And so my work with men has been enormously fulfilling for me, both professionally and personally.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And I was going to say It's really nice to hear you kind of resonate with that. And gender roles aside, it's a tough gig, to be torn, to be dumped in this bucket, having the two separate buckets of the genders and the roles and what have you, but to dump all that into one bucket and fulfill all that yourself that is just a balancing act. And then to
tough. Try to parent on top of it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But to do like all these different avenues that I don't know how you do it. I don't know do you not sleep? Are you like a vampire or something? Because it's really impressive to see, everything that you're working on. And, we touched on it briefly, but tell us a little bit about this podcast that you're now starting up.
Yeah, that's been amazing.
Yeah.
What ended up happening, I didn't even really listen to podcasts. Even though I'm on television quite a bit, the most TV, I have to be honest. Can I be honest with your listeners?
I hope you are, yeah.
Yeah, well, to be honest, I don't actually watch a lot of television, and I think that's part of the reason I get as much done as I can get done.
Yes.
I think there's two types of people in this world. I shouldn't say this. I'm going to make some big generalizations on your show, but we all know we're more nuanced than that. But we're going to start with some generalizations. I think there's people out there who are really good at being consumers and people who are really good at being creators. I'm actually a terrible consumer. I hate shopping. I don't really consume television, but I love to create. And so the most television I watch is when I'm usually getting my hair done at Fox or CNN and the monitor's on and I know I have to be on the show. So I'm watching the segments as they appear. So with the podcast world, I ended up getting asked to speak at quite a large event in Boston, a corporate event on stress management in the workplace. And after it was over, I ended up having a huge discussion on spirituality and stages of enlightenment and higher consciousness and what that means in terms of our health. So I kind of steered away from a classic talk on stress and management in the workplace, which we can find on Huffington Post, the answers to that. And after it was over, all these millennials came up to me. And I work a lot in New York with people from the ages of 25 to 20 to people in their 50s. But all these millennials came up to me after, both men and women, and they were saying, "Where's your podcast?" And I was like, "Podcast?"
Did you not know what one was? Did you not know what podcast?
I did. I mean, I knew it. I saw the button, like the app on my phone. It's actually like so funny. And I was like, "Oh, that's so cute, that button." But I love listening to the radio. I love listening to talk radio. When I had more time, when I was having my children, I would cook in the evenings when I lived in the West Village in New York, and I would buy my ingredients every day. I'm an absolutely horrible cook, like horrible. Well, but I was trying. I was really trying. Yeah. And I would listen to NPR generally while I cooked because I was lonely. I was already starting to feel a bit lonely in my marriage at that time, and so I'd have these little kids around me and they'd be in the pack and plays or playing beside me in the kitchen and I would listen to NPR and cook. So I always loved it. I loved hearing the voice in the dark. And so these millennials said, "Why don't you start a podcast?" And I said, "Okay." And I sort of shelved the idea, but it's like one of those ideas that if it keeps coming forward, if it keeps knocking at your soul, you start to pay attention to it. What is that?
Yeah.
What's that voice? And so I finished writing a book proposal, and when I handed it in to my agents, I all of a sudden had, quote unquote, a little more downtime. And what do I do with downtime generally? I fill it with something equally as interesting intellectually and inspiring that I find meaningful. And so I started doing all this investigating about podcasts and asking around. And the next thing I know, I started a GoFundMe campaign that raised a couple, about $10,000 in a week
wow.
that I launched, that my son encouraged me to do. And I threw myself into the podcast world. So we're going to do some shows that are based around issues that men deal with in particular. And on Sundays, we're going to do something that's a little bit more spiritually minded, sort of a spiritual salon that will be both for men and women, because I think men have just as much of an interest in sort of the universal laws of attraction that women do. And I find that it has a lot to do with spirituality.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I love it. Is there a working title? What are we looking for on
It's just going to be the Nell Daly Show. And to be honest with you, even though I narrowed it down for you guys, we're doing kinds of, really, honestly, I want to just have incredible, engaging conversations with the smartest, brightest people I can absolutely find and beg to talk to me. So I've been lucky, cross my fingers. No one said no yet, which is crazy.
Oh, no.
I've just called amazing people and they're like, "Sure, I'll be on your podcast." And So I get to spend my Mondays and Tuesday afternoons and Wednesday, Thursday, Fridays having great conversations with people like you.
Oh, it's such an amazing experience, and you may be surprised initially, but that's pretty much the norm. Is very few people actually say no. They might say later, but very few say no. It's an amazing world, and I'm very happy to be part of it on my own behalf, but also that I can bring yourself to my listeners, and we can cross over and we can network and we can literally reach millions with excellent messages. And it's just an amazing time. So that's great. I'm looking forward to the launch. Do you have a launch date?
We're hoping it will be Valentine's Day, but as I was saying to you before we started the podcast, things have started to morph into something even bigger, which is awesome. Yeah. So we're thinking now about, we've looked into, and we're on the cusp of starting to sign up with some audio studios that we can actually film the podcasts in, and creating a much bigger production company based on content that will hopefully change a lot of lives, very meaningful content where we can create spaces, safe spaces. Part of the thing that happens to me when I'm on Fox or CNN is that the segments are so short, what they ask you to do. Mm-hmm. And so we can't get into deep discussions. And I think that's the beauty of a podcast, is you can do a deep dive into important topics. And because I'm a real nerd at heart, what I want to create is a safe space where people on two sides of an issue can have meaningful discussion. And those would be great to film, because then you could, obviously have an even larger reach and more content. So it depends. If we decide to just launch with the podcast, we're going to try to do it for Valentine's Day. Yeah. But if we're going to do something much larger, we might push it until the beginning of March.
All right. Well, it's coming in 2017 nonetheless, in early 2017. So yeah, appreciate that. And you brought up something which is kind of all the rage now. We can talk about it as little as you'd like, but the media only really gives us one kind of view. And you said yourself, it's kind of a shortened segment. So it doesn't really allow for that discussion or, bringing up all the points and that sort of thing. So I appreciate you're trying to broaden that scope and broaden that discussion. So
yeah. Well, and I think in the last election, what we saw is that I ended up coming out on Fox, which is a conservative news channel, that I would have rather voted for Hillary. And it's funny because I was just at a local restaurant and a guy came up to me and said, "Are you Nell Daly?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I loved your work until I saw that you went to the Women's March." And I was like, "Dude, didn't you see me on Fox? Like, I'm kind of their liberal commentator." But what's so funny is that I'm actually very independent. And because I watch so little television, I try to garner news from various outlets that tend to be written format. And so I think what we lost in the last election and what's happening in this country is that we just don't understand the other story. And I'm really obsessed with people's stories. I'm really obsessed with the human side of someone's story and the psychology behind the way that they think. And so I, as a journalist, as also a trained journalist, what I'm interested in is creating, again, that open-hearted space where we can have really great discussions from two sides of the table to start to understand what people are struggling with. Men in particular are struggling in this country with their identity, their masculine identity.
Yes, definitely.
They really are, because of the shifting economic times, because of shifting gender roles, because of race and economics in our country, because of politics. And I, as a woman, as kind of on my fingers on the pulse of what's in men's souls because of what I do for a living, I also live in New York City, right? So I'm on one of the coasts, and there's an entire region in this country that doesn't exist, that isn't New York and isn't LA. Yeah. Right? That's the United States as well. And I think people on both sides of the coast have really lost sight of what's going on for the rest of America. And so part of my mission with the podcast is to say, hey, what are you guys experiencing? And can you tell us your stories? Because we need to unite in this country to have progress and to find more truth for ourselves and to create change that will benefit everyone. But to do that, we really have to understand each other's stories and where we're coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the root of all this is being able to understand ourselves. I know I myself, in the last 2 years through this whole process have had more questions for myself and fewer and fewer answers and less of a means to approach those. So, I didn't have access to a therapy session or any of that stuff, or at least I didn't explore that option as I should have. And now I'm able to talk with people like yourself and listening to podcasts and creating podcasts that can answer these questions for men and women in this case. And so I really want to kind of delve into some of your experiences, as far as, here we are now, right? You're 3 years divorced. I'm, a little over 2 years separated, and we're just kind of dealing with it. What have you found in your practice, when people come into these situations? What have you found is the most destructive and then conversely, the most helpful things to be doing, thinking, saying, being involved with? Do you have any recommendations for us as a foundation?
Well, those are such great questions. Really, I love how you brought this back. This idea about what's happening to all of us starts with ourselves and getting to understand and knowing ourselves better. And what I call that is self-intimacy, right? That we cannot begin to understand each other deeply unless we understand ourselves first.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times we function in our lives avoiding that question, because so much of us feel there's lots of layers of self-loathing on top of who we really are. So we're afraid to strip back that layer or forgive ourselves for the things that we've done.
Why are we afraid? Why are we afraid of that?
Because it's painful, and our society is built on avoiding pain. Right. So that's why, there's 80 million Americans on psychiatric medication. Oof. That's why 1 of every 4 women is on psychiatric medication during her childbearing years. That's why rehabs are overflowing. That's why people shop constantly. We avoid pain, and the pain that we avoid a lot in our lives are not only our family situations, our relationships with other people, our interpersonal relationships, but really we avoid what we're feeling inside ourselves.
Wow.
And so we try to cover that with either a lot of behaviors or a lot of addictions that don't serve us or take us away from what we feel.
Well, I want to make sure I understand this clearly, because I totally agree with what you're saying here, but now, it can't be true in every case, but it sounds like people are just medicating themselves so they don't have to feel pain. And that pain is what is going to drive up a change, positive or negative, and that's all self-directed. But it sounds like medication may be some of the issue.
Yeah. And again, this is a case-by-case basis, so I want to be really careful here, because there can be a place for psychiatric medication in society, in our culture. I also want to go back to something that you said that was really brilliant, and you didn't even know you said it.
I do that.
If you go back into any of the religious traditions or spiritual traditions that we can study, you said, the more I know, the less I know. You didn't know you said it, but you said it. And that's the case as well, right? The more we know, the more I do this work, the less I know. And I know that might not be very comforting to your listeners, but I think it's about that constant, I have a constant need and a constant desire to yes, do I have opinions on things? And yes, do I see certain truths in my life? But the more I stay open, the more I learn. So I think it's important to have these open conversations to keep learning. And that helps drive our curiosity, and it builds upon itself. Yeah. The question being, why do we need to suffer? That's what I really heard in your question.
Yeah,
why
absolutely.
Do we need to? Yeah. We learn our souls at the shrine of grief. That's where we learn things. And so the way I was clinically trained, and the way that many physicians and psychotherapists, psychiatrists have been trained traditionally in this country, is to not talk about the soul. And then all of a sudden I started my private practice, and what I was really experiencing was communing with someone else's soul. I felt much more like a minister than I ever did a doctor. And for a long time, the work was about helping people not feel stigma about their quote unquote mental illness. We heard their symptoms, we classified them, and then we prescribed a drug to treat their symptoms. And over the last couple of years, what began to occur to me, this never felt right. This always felt bad to me. it didn't sit right, because what happens when people go on these medications, for women, generally it's the birth control and they're on some sort of SSRI, is a deadening of their voice, right? It's hard to cry. You have sexual dysfunction. You start to live in a much shallower pool. And really what we're meant to do in this country is not necessarily feel happy. What we're meant to do on this earth isn't to feel happy, even though we're sold happiness constantly everywhere we turn.
Yes, absolutely.
Our job, our soul's job, and our spiritual responsibility to ourselves is to feel a dynamic range of emotions as much as we can every single day, and to not be afraid of those emotions. So I tell patients all the time, you want to picture your emotional life as a grand piano, and it's at Lincoln Center, and it's in the middle of the stage, and you want to climb onto that stage every day, and you want to sit down at that piano, which is your emotional range, and you want to play your opus every single day. Because what really brings us a lot of pleasure in this life is not necessarily quote unquote happiness. It's being moved. We thrive when we're being engaged and we feel as if we're being moved emotionally. And sometimes that happens at the lower end of the spectrum, if not a lot. The reality is we're all going to face sorrow in our lives every single day. Mm-hmm. Sorrow is something that you could wake up happy, but then you could pass a deer that's been killed in the road, or you could get a bad phone call. You could have a negative experience at work, and you're going to feel sorrow. So our job as an adult isn't necessarily to cover that sorrow with, again, alcohol or psychiatric medication. It's to learn how to surrender to that sorrow and move through it in order to experience what we're supposed to learn from that experience, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, that resonates pretty soundly with kind of where I've found myself currently. I know as a man, it's been, and you've probably seen this in your practice, but as a man, it's extremely difficult, or has been, for me to really express what's going on inside. You know, I've been conditioned through society largely. I mean, I've been allowed to express some emotion, but I mean, sorrow, grief, anger, pain, all that stuff. You know, I've seen men tuck this down deep inside and never allow themselves to recognize that they have these issues, and, you know, be a man up, handle it, this, that, and the other thing. And there's something to be said for that, right? I don't want to be, you know, this gigantic goopy mess of a person, but at the same time, I need to know how to express these things and feel comfortable doing so. This is a really difficult question, I'm sure, not only to ask but to answer. In that, where's the line? How do we approach this as men, as people?
It's a wonderful, wonderful question. And what I just want to go back to is two of the things that you didn't mention is depression and anxiety.
Yes.
So when we cover our uncomfortable feelings, then we end up becoming incredibly symptomatic with depression and anxiety. And I see a lot of men who don't identify what they're experiencing as necessarily pain or sorrow. Men don't often come into my office and say, I feel really sad. They feel really anxious.
Yes.
Right. They're experiencing a lot of intrusive thinking. They've become obsessive compulsive. They're ruminating on one thought over and over and over again that they can't get out of their head. They have insomnia. They're having sexual dysfunction. They're having all of these symptoms and they don't know where it comes from. And part of it just comes from not being able to take enough time out of our busy lives, right? We don't expect, especially when we become parents, like no one can prepare us for how incredibly frenetic our lives become between graduating from college. Most of us, you know, probably your listeners are from school, whether that's through high school or college or graduate school, entering into the workforce, getting married, and then all of a sudden you have a family, and it doesn't seem like even an option to slow down and actually feel what you're supposed to be feeling.
Yeah,
absolutely. It doesn't even seem like a physical option. So when you say goopy mess, so what happens is when I start talking to patients and trying to strip away, well, what's making you feel anxious or depressed? Those are just symptoms that something bigger is happening either within the body or in your environment that's causing you stress. We're all animals, we're all organisms in an environment. So you feel a ton of stress. That's how it's manifesting itself in, let's say, obsessive compulsive behavior. But underneath of that, what I always ask my patients, what is the wound? What is the wound? And to deal with whatever the wound is, whatever the hidden grief is that you've covered over and over again through all the ways that we've spoken about, we have let's say a pool of sorrow. So again, our job as adults to become mature adults is to learn how to have what we call an apprenticeship with grief and sorrow. And this concept comes from a beautiful writer and psychotherapist, and what is now a burgeoning field. I want to be at the forefront of this very disruptive field called soul psychology, or other people call it holistic psychiatry. So at the foundation, one of the foundations of this burgeoning field is this idea of learning how to have an apprenticeship with our grief. And Francis Weller talks about this. And how do you not become a goopy mess when you're a man and you want to talk about your feelings, or a woman? This can apply to women as well. And I always describe it to my patients. An apprenticeship with grief means if you have, let's say, a cup, and you put a cup, let's say, on an altar, and you put your pain in that cup. Just follow me here for a second.
Sure.
Having an apprenticeship with grief means that when we feel that pain throughout the day, we don't get into the cup with it. We don't jump into the cup and lose ourselves and don't get out of bed and just fall apart. We can't do this as adults. We can't do it as parents. We have to step back further. We have to step back away from the cup enough. And I always say you have to have reverence for your sorrow. So you kneel in front of that cup, and in one hand you have self-compassion, and on the other hand you have mercy. But you don't want to stand so far away from your grief as if you were at the back of this shrine where you don't feel it, because we need to be able to feel what we're supposed to feel in order to grow and evolve and change.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Okay.
I love the opinion that we need to really observe what it is we're feeling and try and find the root of it. And this is a great way to go about that. Yes. All yeses over here.
but so many people, so many men, especially because men are shamed for having feelings.
Yeah.
Men are shamed and generally they can be shamed for reaching out to express their feelings or try to get help. And so many men don't get help for their symptoms. And so I think it's really important to be able to give men a place where they can process this kind of anxiety and depression and grief that they're having, but not fall apart in the face of it.
Nice.
So we have to have those discussions. So,
okay, this place that you're talking about, is this a psychiatrist's office? Is this a group of brothers? Is this, a church group, or, could this be something like, well, I mean, not to be totally self-serving, but that's kind of why I started the Facebook group for We RAD Dads.
Totally. Totally. I think men and women, it's again, this goes back to this new masculine identity. What women have, and we saw it with the Women's March in Washington a couple weeks ago, we have a tribe. We've bonded together. We historically bond together. Historically, we've raised our babies in little tribes with each other. Women rely on each other. We talk about our feelings with each other. Men have to we picture men going out in a solo fashion and hunting and killing and bringing it back to the tribe. Literally, that's how we usually talk about men. They bring back the bacon to the tribe. I think men without a tribe really struggle because what happens is it creates this place of isolation. And so you're feeling all these feelings and then you feel isolated on top of it. It's really a recipe for disaster because we intrinsically want to feel seen and heard and loved.
Yeah.
Whether you're a man or a woman in this culture. So without a tribe, it can become very, very isolating. So you've created a tribe. I think tribes are important, and I think sharing our experiences so you don't feel alone, right? When you just reach out, and it's really important to encourage men to reach out, because when they don't, obviously they suffer even more.
Nice.
And needlessly, because there are people to talk to. So it becomes a podcast that you're listening to where you can gain information. But what I think is so beautiful about the podcast world is that then they create all these little subculture groups. So it's not that you just listen to this in the radio while you're commuting to, over the radio or over your iPhone or whatever when you're going to work. You can actually then physically talk to people who have heard the same programming and discuss issues around that, and hopefully keep the information flowing.
Nice. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to do, is get out all the resources as possible to just, grapple with our situation, grapple with our emotions, grapple with the next best step, and move forward with our lives. It's funny. I'm at a point now where I'm really okay. I've processed the past, and it's like, okay, I'm done with that. I've moved out of that space, and I'm moving forward. And it's just kind of like, okay, well, I don't quite know how to do this forward, but I know that other people have, and then I will too. And I'll figure it out as I go along. Is there any resources that you know of to help us along the way?
Well, I think I wanted to go back. I had it written down. You asked me the question, what kind of advice do you give to people who first come into your office who are experiencing the breakup of a family as they knew it and are embarking on the single parent journey? And you just answered it for yourself. It's knowing that this is not going to be your forever.
Yeah.
Feelings are not fixed states. And I'm going to repeat that. Feelings are not fixed states. They move. So as bad as you might feel one day, it's really important that every single listener hears me who might feel as if they're in crisis right now, know that they are not going to feel this way forever. And I don't really understand the mind. I'm not a neuroscientist. I don't really understand why is it that we know this, right, since the time that we have memory, since the time we start building our memory banks, right, when we're 2-3 years old. Mm-hmm. We know that we can, again, feel happy in the morning and then sad in the afternoon and then happy again 5 minutes later. And if someone walks in who makes us laugh, we're laughing. And then if we watch a commercial, we start to cry. We have emotional volatility throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month, throughout the year. But somehow when we're in crisis, we click into this fight or flight response and we think this is never going to end.
Yeah.
And the reality is it does end, and you will shift out of that space. And there are a couple of things and tools that I give my patients that really help them create a little arsenal, if you will, or a toolkit to be able to deal with those more tense experiences or quote unquote crisis situations to get them through if they're experiencing one at the time.
Nice. Is this anything that is like some sort of an online resource, or is this kind of a coaching deal?
Well, it definitely comes in the form of psychoeducation, mm-hmm. which again, I think the online resources are great for. Obviously, being able to talk to whether it's a therapist or just have part of learning how to handle pain or crisis is to have someone to go, what we say, Francis Weller talks about, having someone to go into the river with you. Mm. So we oftentimes, men will say to me, I'm scared to feel what I'm feeling because I'm scared I'll never come back. Women will say, if I start to cry, I'm afraid I'll never stop crying. And I always look at both genders and say, I'm scared if you don't start down this path, you're never going to come back.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
You're going to keep, drinking every night. You're going to keep having, let's say, reckless sex or whatever it is that you do to cover whatever you're experiencing. You're going to stay in an unhappy relationship or an abusive relationship. You're going to stay in a job that isn't serving you anymore if you don't start to unpack whatever you're feeling. So part of it, though, is about having somebody out there that can hold your hand while you dip into that river of pain, and you can look to see on the side of the river, knowing you're not going to drown because they have you. So that's part of finding your person or people, a little bit of a tribe, a little bit of community. So that's one thing. The second thing is I am a huge believer in daily meditation. Massive. Yeah. Because scientifically what it does is it actually calms and it taps into something called your parasympathetic nervous system. Uh-huh. So through breath, through meditation, through mantras, we can actually physically calm ourselves down and then function from a higher place of clarity. But it also, when you learn how to meditate, gives you a compartmentalized time period throughout the day where you can sink into those places in your heart that might feel more tender or more afraid or more painful. You can, what I call, plow those fields. And then when your meditation is up, you come out of that space and then you move throughout your day. So if someone comes in and they just lost a child, or they've broken up with a lover that they were completely in love with, or a husband or a wife, they're going through that kind of emotional heartbreak. Oftentimes they're grieving all day long. And one of the things that grief therapists will do is say, let's set a clock. So you have an hour today from 9 to 10 to grieve and to really feel awful. But then from 10 to 12, you have to move throughout your day. Meditation can also serve as that clock where you're sinking into this place. You're allowing yourself to cry, to grieve, to experience whatever emotional state you need to experience. And then you come out of that meditation and then you move throughout your day. And there's been times in my own life, especially my divorce actually wasn't that painful. It was painful in the sense that it was a slow death and someone just eventually needed to pull the cord, right?
Yeah.
Like it was like being at the side of someone dying of cancer in a hospital room. It was like eventually like just, you hate to say it, but like, let's like end the pain here.
Right.
What was really difficult for me is I had a relationship after quite soon after my divorce was over. I met someone very soon afterwards, and we were together for 2 years, and we actually got engaged the second year that we were together, and we broke off the engagement about a year ago. And that is when I hit my knees in prayer and meditation. I was in so much pain from that heartbreak and sort of years of accumulated heartbreak and loss that I had never dealt with. I mean, you can only imagine all the stories that I've heard in my office over the past 10 years. I've heard, I've worked with families from 9/11 to what the massacre in Newtown.
Yeah.
And I had never taken any time off from my life to actually grieve those losses or to process them. And so sometimes one loss can trigger like a domino effect, a series of losses. And it was after that breakup that a friend of mine who's a doctor, actually named Dr. Kelly Brogan, who wrote a wonderful book called A Mind of Your Own, said to me, you're going to become, this is going to feel so painful, it will drive you to your knees in meditation. And sure enough, it did. And that meditation practice saved me. And as a parent, I want to bring this show back to parenting.
Sure.
Because you do not have the capacity or the ability or the time to be a mess in front of your kids all the time.
Yeah, definitely.
We have to learn how to compartmentalize the anxiety that we're feeling throughout the day, or the anger that we're feeling, or the sadness. And so that meditation practice, I would get up before they would need to get up for school. And in the dark, for months at a time, I would sit in front of my computer and do some guided meditation. And then, the light would start to come up over the fields where I live, and the alarm clocks would start to go off, and I'd start to brew coffee, and I had to pull myself together and actually be a parent.
Wow. Right. There's there's so much in that last bit there. And I think I wanted to start off by saying that, agree with your point way back where you were talking about, this emotion is present now, but it will pass. And, for yourself, you're talking about meditation. And I think that has its place to really get right with yourself first. And that's a great way to do that. But you took the action. You took the action of actually meditating. So nothing's really going to change until we are capable of taking action. It doesn't have to be monumental action. It can be something really simple at first, whatever that is for each of us listening. But more than that, I really want to recognize you for opening yourself up. You talked about a relationship after your divorce. And I know I really want to get into this segment as well, is where we're talking about relationships, as a single parent and as, a grieving, I don't know, maybe not grieving, but, your post-bomb crater self, where you don't have the stability that you had before. Everything's kind of dynamic and changing. And, what are the good? What are the bad? Tell us, let's talk about dating. Let's talk about whether or not we should, talk about, when are we ready? You said yourself, you got into a relationship early after your divorce. Was that some sort of a maybe coping mechanism? Was that something that, you couldn't be alone to process your emotions? Is it, tell us what's going on there. Unpack that for us, if you would.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, yeah.
It's huge and it's lovely and it's juicy and I'll totally get into it. I'm happy to do that. I love the
Thank you.
juicy. I'm all about the intimacy here. I just want to go back really quickly just so we don't lose the thread and we can close that loop and then we'll come to the dating part.
Sure.
What you said was that I took the steps to actually start to meditate, and I encourage all of my patients to do the same. You need to have what's called a psycho-spiritual practice in order to live holistically. And when I say holistically, I don't mean in the purest sense of everything that you eat is organic or you're vegan or whatever. It means as kind of quote unquote soberly as you possibly can. Mm-hmm. I think it's very, very difficult to do it without some sort of psycho-spiritual practice, and meditation is considered a psycho-spiritual practice. And even though you say that I took the action to do it, it was hard work.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the thing. A lot of my patients want the help. And a lot of people want help out there, but they're really scared of doing the hard work.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
This isn't easy. This is not easy. And it took a lot of work to get up at 5 a.m. It took a lot of work to get on my knees. I was freezing cold. It took a lot of work to feel sad, to grieve. I think, I want to avoid things just as much as everyone else. I have a harder time doing that because if I'm encouraging other people not to avoid their issues, I find it really difficult to be a psychotherapist and not be completely authentic myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that always, it just felt wrong to me. It didn't translate. Like you can feel it in the room when I'm actually doing the work if I'm being inauthentic. So I wake up every morning and I pray that I will be authentic and be able to own what I need to own about myself and be fearless in that. So it's a lot of hard work to do something called radical self-care.
I like this already. Radical.
Yeah, radical self-care, and I believe in radical transparency as well, which gets into a different kind of topic in terms of relationships. But I really encourage people when they're going through crisis or these kinds of situations, and as a single parent, which it's like so hard because radical self-care feels nearly impossible when you're juggling as much as you're juggling. It's like, how do you take care of yourself? I always had to laugh. Arianna Huffington wrote her book on Thrive, which is on sleep. And I was like, oh my God, I have 3 little kids and I work and sleep seems like such a luxury. But there I am as a psychotherapist. And it's one of the major foundations to wellness is sleep and getting sleep. But like, how do you sleep well when you're scared financially or you've just lost someone that you've loved in a relationship and you're scared you're never going to find someone else again, or one of your children is sick or whatever have you. So again, radical self-care and making a commitment to do that every single day has to be one of your number one priorities. And it takes effort. You cannot minimize how much, and we don't like we don't always love to put in the effort to things, and we don't always love to stay committed to things.
Oh yeah.
Because it's so easy to get distracted in modern day society. So going to the relationship question, yeah, you said, should you date? Should you not date? Should I have dated? In terms of bringing it back to my own personal life, should I have not? I've always encouraged, or I guess I should say discourage my patients from putting should and shouldn'ts on anything. Life just is, right?
Yeah.
We try to make the best decisions. No one, generally people don't move from bad or ill intentions. And it was my process. When people come in and they say, should I be doing this? Should I be dating right after my let's say I'm getting divorced. I'm just going to keep saying divorce because that's the example that's in my head. I always tell patients, let's take away the should or shouldn't. We'll just explore it. Let's just crack open the question. Let's whiteboard it. And then maybe we'll come to sort of a different perspective on it. But let's take away the self-shame and the judgment that we put upon ourselves when we act in certain ways. Because for many of us, relationships can be very soothing and very therapeutic. And because I'm spiritual, I also believe that people are brought into our lives for different reasons, and we can't always predict the timing. We just can't. And so for me, my own process, my own growth process, my own personal transformation process had to deal with, I believe, big picture wise. I'm going to look back on my life and say that was a moment in time where should I have gotten right into a relationship, I was really lonely in my marriage for many years. So when this relationship came along, and I pretty much fell in love with him from hello.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like I literally excused myself to go to the bathroom before he even ordered me the first martini he ordered me. And I don't even drink martinis, but I was so nervous. I didn't know what else to say. So I was like so new on the dating scene. I went into the bathroom and I called my best friend and can I swear on the program? Or do you not want
why
me
not?
to?
Yeah, just be you.
I said I'm totally
Beep.
here. And I didn't mean literally, because I actually am quite shy about like I don't sleep around, I don't date around like that. I just meant like literally, like on a psychological level. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this person just walked into my life and he literally stood up and said hello, and my knees went weak for the first time in my life. That happened to me. And so should or shouldn't flies out the door.
Yeah.
Right? Like
yeah.
there's no, I mean, what do you do? Like, what do? Do you turn that down and say, I actually need to learn how to be by myself? And I actually never gave that advice to patients, because being by yourself sucks sometimes.
Oh yeah. A lot.
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot. Now I love my life, and I have learned, I'm so grateful that he was in my life, and I'm grateful that we decided to end the relationship, in part because my journey to self-intimacy had to do with me actually physically being alone. And that's not always the case for everybody. Some of us can have that journey while we're married to somebody else or we're in long partnerships. We can learn these lessons our souls need to learn. But for me, I had, I look back on my life now, and I had a boyfriend since the time I was in nursery school.
Yeah. Nice.
I always had a guy around. I always had men lingering around me. I loved men. I had older brothers. I grew up in a very alpha family. My dad is incredibly good looking and charismatic, and I was always drawn in by men. And so after that relationship ended, it was the first time in my life, and I wanted to fill it again with the attention of a guy on some level, like many of us do. And the companionship, I really love companionship. And I don't want to do this life alone. That's not why I got divorced. I didn't get divorced to be alone. I got divorced because I actually wanted to be in a relationship with somebody that we were compatible. And so my journey then ended up becoming one where I hit the brakes big time. Again, I got on my knees in prayer and meditation. I was in so much pain. There was no way I was going to be able to date at that point. And it was such a gift from whatever you believe in, God, source, the creator, because I ended up going on this incredible solo journey for a year into different worlds, into different types of alternative healing practices, into running a much more holistic practice, but also a journey into myself and into finding out who I really am, what I really want to manifest in this world, what my soul's purpose is here on this planet. Because I think, again, and this happens quite a lot with men and parents in general, we feel very trapped in our circumstances because we haven't taken the time out. And I know you just did this by taking a month off from the podcast. And when we got back on the phone, you said, I needed to take a month off to be able to meditate on what I wanted to manifest in 2017. And what an incredible, healthy thing to do.
Thanks.
I mean, it's huge. It's huge. And so often we don't feel like we have the luxury. Many of us don't have the luxury of doing something like that. So then again, it's about carving out ways we can and finding ways we can. But for me, I needed to do that journey because the bigger picture of my life didn't feel like this is what I was supposed to do here. I was supposed to do something, bigger and different. And I also needed to learn how to enjoy my own company.
Yeah. Yeah.
And fill my time with super interesting people and things and experiences, and go back to that curiosity that I had, this flame of deep curiosity about the world that I would experience at times in high school and college, where I would sit in the stacks of the libraries and read book after book after book. And I had lost that becoming a parent. I stopped reading. I stopped on some level, even though my work is incredibly engaging and interesting and meaningful. I had stopped becoming engaged with myself and interesting and curious. And so I hit the brakes, literally. I grieved. And then part of working my way out of that grief was cultivating things in my life that gave me great joy, So I craved being alone to further explore those endeavors. And part of that was tapping into my creative self.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I see that parallel a lot. I saw it with myself, as far as the things that really lit me up that I had given up on for whatever reason, for other people, because of social expectations, for any of that stuff. I started rediscovering them, whether or not they were the exact same things, same type of hobbies, whatever, it doesn't matter. That curiosity is to get childlike, so to speak, and just be curious and get out there and do what it is that you want to do. And that's that singularity, that being alone with yourself, that is what's going to allow you to do that. And you could do it at any level. You could do it at home on your computer. You could do, and it's gotten me to where I've coined this, 3-prong approach to, recovery as a single parent or anybody in any type of emotional circumstances. Find yourself, know yourself, and then be yourself. Those are the 3 general steps that I kind of follow along. It sounds like you did very much the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what, so much of it is when we start talking about creating a more meaningful life that can be more solitary, curiosity, we don't talk, there's a few great books that have come out in the last few years about curiosity, and curiosity is actually a major human drive. And like sex is, like food is, in order to thrive, we have certain drives. This comes back to a realm of psychology called drive theory. And curiosity is one of those. And curiosity is interesting because curiosity feeds upon curiosity. Mm-hmm. So if you start to be curious, you become more curious, and then you become more curious, and it feels really good. I mean, it's why part of what motivates you to do the podcast is to learn. Yeah. And often in our daily lives, they become so routine. They become so filled with the mundane, what I call the daily drudgery, that we stop being curious. And I had stopped exercising my intellectual drive that way. And that then leads into the possibility of creativity. And what's really interesting for our souls and our psyche when we talk about being creativity, and I know you've dealt with this with the podcast, you start dipping into what your fears are. Should I put myself out there? Am I smart enough? Am I good enough? And you've got to do all of that work on yourself in order to be creative. Can I let go of my ego to channel something that I want to channel into this world creatively? And I know Elizabeth Gilbert does a beautiful podcast on creativity with her book, Big Magic, because she struggled with this in her own life as a writer. So I think that again, and that just stretches our capacity, that stretches our emotional range, that makes our opus even bigger if we start to push ourselves to face our fears of being accepted and loved if we have something to say or put out in this world. The other thing that this journey of getting to know yourself intimately takes you on, the other stops, I would say, on that train, again, go back to self-forgiveness and then forgiving others. Yeah. And I was always really like, I tiptoed around this with my patients for years because I never wanted to forgiveness shame anyone. Mm-hmm. Right? Like we always, at the end of every self-help book, there's always a chapter on forgiveness. Right. And so many of the religious tenets that we read have to do with forgiveness. And there's things that I've heard people express to me over the years that seem completely unforgivable. Yeah. Right. So, I mean, we've all had things done to us that we have not wanted to forgive, that just seem, right? Absolutely. That seem impossible to forgive. And so I always would never forgiveness shame anyone. But I realized in my own life, and I realize now, that there are ways I have found ways to forgive not only myself, but others I didn't intend on ever forgiving. And how that has freed me as a human being has been pretty remarkable, and in turn freed a lot of my patients. So you went from forgiveness cynic to someone who recognizes the value in it, basically. I did. Yeah, well, I did too. I did the same thing. It was just like, I didn't understand the power in this before, but maybe I had to get to a place where I was so powerless and just so beat that. Surrender. Yeah, so that I literally had to surrender to it. And once I kind of did that, it was just like, well, why was I holding on to this stuff? It's just, I was just dragging it around, and it's past. It's the water under the bridge at this point. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah. And for me, it wasn't even, why am I holding it? Why am I holding it around? Or, obviously I'm a huge yogi. And so I believe in like taking in what you need and letting go what you don't, and a lot of Buddhist practices and Eastern philosophies. But for me, it got into a bigger spiritual world of karma and karmic contracts.
Mm-hmm.
And this idea that if we don't surrender, we suffer. So suffering happens when we don't surrender to our circumstances. The other mantra that I heard once that really shifted my own thinking about forgiveness was life gets a lot easier when you stop expecting in the mail the apology you're never going to get.
Interesting.
Like you just may not get that apology, but how do you choose to move forward? And that is a pretty huge one. I was like, oh yeah, life does get a lot better when I stop having that expectation of other people in my life who I feel might not have behaved the way I would have liked them to.
Yeah.
But that was their soul's journey. That was the journey they needed to take, and I needed to then act accordingly. And these are some of the deeper conversations I'm able to have with patients who aren't necessarily medicating their pain. Because when you're medicating your pain, it's very difficult to have these conversations because you're not able to tap into these places as easily.
Yeah, absolutely. Real quickly, I think that a lot of people identify surrendering with giving up. And I want to make sure that we can kind of real briefly separate those two because they are not the same.
Yeah. Again, with all of these philosophical or psychological discussions about these topics, there's always contradictions in them.
Yeah.
Okay. But we're nuanced thinkers. So I know your audience and my audience can handle this kind of talk. Patients always say to me, why do I have to suffer if I don't have to? Like why they keep harping on it. Like they don't want to suffer and they don't want to surrender, but surrender means giving up. I don't want to give up. So that kind of surrender isn't the kind of surrender we're necessarily talking about. It's literally cracking your heart open to whatever you're experiencing.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean giving up.
And this goes back to what we were talking about before, where we really kind of analyze our emotions and what's the core, what's the root of it, what's the foundation of it. So accepting that you're having these emotions, feelings, thoughts, whatever it is, and then accepting it as the way things are, because that is exactly where we're at right now. And then working on finding out, okay, well, why do I feel this way about this sort of thing? And do I need to? Do I need to continue worrying or thinking this way? And has it programmed me for future occurrences? And I started diving into this stuff and I found that, I was carrying around a lot of stuff that I just, there was no point. It wasn't going to move the needle in a positive direction ever. And just let it go, and I think talking about it with guests, with other people, with, just doing the solo shots, occasionally, it's been really therapeutic to approach that and really question what it was I was, emotional about, angry, upset, sad, scared, whatever,
Do you want me to give I have a quick little concrete example I can give about the idea of surrender?
Sure.
That might be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, again, just because it's off the one that's coming to the top of my head right now is I recently ate lunch at a cafe that I used to eat lunch at with this fiance that I was engaged to and I was at this little cafe we went to 1,000 times and I didn't want to go. Someone said, can you meet me at this cafe? And I thought, oh shit, I don't want to go there. Yeah. I don't want to do it. I don't want to. I want to avoid. Let's just avoid all the places I've ever been. But I went, and over lunch, this person's chatting away with me, and I'm trying not to cry because all I see is the ghosts of my past walking around there, and I see my children in that store and the ghosts of them and days that we had and all kinds of seasons eating lunch at this cafe. And I got in the car and I was driving away, and I had to get on a train to go into New York City, and I had a very busy afternoon and evening ahead of me. And this is the art of surrender. I said to myself, I started to feel all this anxiety and sadness and sorrow creep up. So my apprenticeship with sorrow in that moment was crack your heart open to it. Surrender. Just break your heart open. Breathe it in. It's painful. This is a painful experience. That was painful. I'm just going to surrender that that's where I am. Now, if I had said, I don't want to feel it. I don't want to feel it. Why am I feeling it? Why am I feeling it? That's only causing anxiety.
Yeah.
Right? That's just going to get me to ruminate the entire train ride in on the past relationship, what went wrong, how could we have changed things, are we supposed to be together?
Right.
Maybe this is.
What if I had done something different? What if this, or yeah, exactly. I know what you're talking about.
Instead, that's not my reality. The reality is that our relationship had ended a year ago, and that I was being flooded with memories. And so literally I practiced, and it's sort of a meditative practice. As I drove to the train, I just said, crack your heart open, surrender. As if you're lying, for those of your listeners who do yoga, as if you're lying in savasana on your mat at the end of a yoga session. You tend to lie on your back, supported by the universe, but your palms up in a state of surrender. And that's the surrender that I love. It's my palms are up to the universe. I surrender to my circumstances, but I'm not going to forget that I am supported.
Yeah.
That I'm supported by the universe. I'm supported by the people that love me. I'm supported by my tribe. I'm supported by the practices that I have in place. I'm supported by my children. I'm supported by my faith, whatever your faith is.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the time I got onto the train, did I feel sad for a few minutes? Yeah. Did I shed a tear? Absolutely. Thank God, because it means I loved hard.
Mm-hmm.
But literally by the time I sat on the train, I was able to put on my glasses and open my laptop and get back to work. So that's the kind of surrender we want to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And, oh man, I hate to, but it looks like we're bumping up against time. I know that you're a busy person. I value your time. And I really wanted to thank you for joining us today. We barely scratched the surface of what it was we wanted to talk about, but it doesn't matter because we have, I have contact with you frequently, and I'm looking forward to having more discussions about love, sex, even, interpersonal relationships, parenting, just all the wealth of knowledge that you are. So I'm really looking forward to that. Thank you for kind of giving us a little deep dive into kind of our introspective, spiritual, what it is we need to look at for ourselves and help ourselves forward. It's been enlightening, and it's been, this is the kind of stuff that I want to spread the word on. I think that self-help, that's where it all starts, and then we can build that foundation and move forward. So Nell, thank you so much for being open with us today.
Yeah, well, I hope you have me back on the show, because again, we'll have to just focus it on what it is like to date with, for many of my patients, because 50% of us are divorced now, so it's something I see in my practice all the time. What it's like to date as a single parent, kind of the good, the things that work, that don't work, the things that we all face that are really difficult, trying to blend families, sex and new relationships, men and how they feel about sex these days, and again, the new masculine and how that relates to sex and questions about sex. So I just encourage any of your listeners to reach out, let you know what's going on out there, and you pass those messages on to me, and we'll do this again. And I'm happy to be of assistance in any way possible.
Nell, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And I look forward to every one of our conversations, but I really hope that we can get you back on soon, and we can have those really juicy conversations, because you don't shy away from any of that.
No, I don't. I certainly don't.
All right. Fantastic. Nell, this is your soapbox. If you'd like to just go ahead and, promote yourself, or how do we get in contact with you? If somebody has a question, or a comment or anything like that, how do we get in touch with you? How do we support you?
Yeah, sure. So again, the podcast, please look for it on iTunes, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. I'm not sure when you're going to air this show, but hopefully by the time it's up.
Oh yeah, definitely.
The Nell Daly show will be up. And let's see, you can reach me on Facebook, on Instagram, Nell Daly, and on the Daily website, which is just called thedaily.com. Please reach out. We have a whole team answering emails and questions, and we try to get back to everybody. And I appreciate you giving me this opportunity to be of service.
Oh, yeah.
I really thank you. It's a joy.
And thanks for your friendship as well. It's been really nice to just be part of your world. So,
I want a t-shirt that says NFE, not for everybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm psyched. I'm psyched to be part of We RAD Dads. You guys are doing the good work, and Man, I think dads are hot too. So thanks to be on the show.
There you go, guys. There you go. Dads are hot. You have it from an authority, an acclaimed authority.
Dads. I like the dad bod. I'm kind of into the dad bod, actually.
Well, you're in luck.
Thanks so much, honestly.
All right, Nell, thank you. Hey guys, just a quick wrap up. I know we went a little long this week, but I couldn't just cut it off. I really love talking to Nell. She's just a wonderful person, inside and out. And man, there were so many awesome things talking about men struggling with their masculine identity, self-loathe, and self-love, experiencing a wide range of emotions. And man, what a trigger! You say that word, emotions. Go ahead, I dare you to say it out loud. Emotions. Yeah, you really want to challenge yourself. Go ahead and look at yourself in the mirror and you say, I do have emotions. It is a tough thing for us to deal with as guys, but I think it's more and more common nowadays. And we're talking about where to unpack those emotions. Now, we talked about a need for tribe, and the We RAD Dads Facebook group is where I hope to be able to do that. Head on over to Facebook. Search and find the We RAD Dads Facebook group, either on the quick links, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, behind the album art on the iTunes player, or there's a link also on the website, any of the show notes pages, or just go over to the Facebook and search We RAD Dads. Join the group. Request to join. I will add you, and that's all there is to it. Guys, I really hope that you're getting some value out of and insights out of these conversations. And this one was really personal. But Nell has agreed to come on, and man, I'm really hoping that she is going to be more of a regular here. We talked actually after the episode about her being able to answer questions and whatnot. So her expertise and all of her accolades are behind here, and I'm super excited to continuing to work with her. And you may end up finding me on her show very soon. So I'll let you know when that happens. But guys, I really hope this episode made you think and lets you know that you're not alone in this. Guys, men, fathers, and mothers, we all struggle in certain ways. Guys, if you're having an issue, reach out. That's what I'm here for. Guys, even if it's just to my email, that's walter@weraddads.com. I would love to help you out. That's what I'm here for. I don't do this for any other reason. The one thing that keeps me going every single week is knowing that potentially there is somebody listening for the first time, and they are in that place that I've been in, the place that you were in, the place that you had no resources. The rug had been pulled out from underneath you. You've just been gut punched and the wind just got knocked out of you. You remember that? I remember it. I think we all do. And we try to bury it. But understand there are people going through that every single day. That's what the group is all about, guys. That's what the show is all about. I really appreciate your support. Please use the quick links to go through our affiliates and support the show. All that goes straight back into the show. And I really appreciate you guys supporting me as I'm trying to support you. Let me know. Let me know if I'm achieving that. Let me know if I'm failing or falling short. That's walter@weraddads.com. Or, of course, I'm always on the Facebook group. Guys, join up over there. Let's reach out and let's support each other. Guys, I can't emphasize this enough, but I am in the trenches right here with you. I've got some big things happening this year. I can't talk about it yet, but there might be something big on the horizon. Yeah, big teaser here. So stay tuned, guys. Reach out, please. If you're having any issues whatsoever, reach out. And hey, reach out if you're celebrating wins. I love to hear wins as well as being able to help other folks. So guys, stay up, stay connected, and stay rad, dads. I love you all. See you next week. Take care.
Well, that's it for this episode of We Rad Dads. I sincerely thank you for joining us. Don't forget to look us up at www.weraddads.com. There you can find links to our Facebook page and Twitter account. Got a question or comment? It may be featured. Email me, walter@weraddads.com. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks again for joining us. And remember, stay up, stay connected, and stay rad, dads.